It's all.
But there's still federal dollars attached to those.
But I asked if the state contributes anything to those.
I think you would have to give us the specifics of what you're asking, and we could give you the dollars of what.
Let's take Bridgeport, for instance. Bridgeport's been flat funded ECS, right? If we look at the total that Bridgeport got from the state in 2009, the highest year there, and we took a look at what Bridgeport got in 2012, and then Torrington for those same 2 years, I'm guessing Bridgeport would get a higher percentage, more money from the state for all of the educational programs than Torrington. I'm just guessing that. Would I be wrong? I mean, would you tell me I'm wrong?
Well, they would fall under the criteria of a priority school district.
Well, precisely. That's exactly what I was saying.
But I don't know if you can necessarily compare Torrington to a Bridgeport either, because you're looking at.
We have unmet needs. I think
But
we have unmet needs, and they have unmet needs.
We do, but there is clearly, and you could ask your superintendent. We are nowhere near a Bridgeport.
Deo gratias.
And we don't. There's issues there that are insurmountable to the ones that we think we're challenged with. And there are certain criteria of which we are required by law to obtain, but it does go down to what federal requirements are versus state requirements. And I see Ms. DeMonico and Ms. Clacko up there shaking their head, and I don't think that you can lump it all together. You got big city, small city, and we are the biggest city in the northwest corner, but we're still a small town. And we're not comparable to Bridgeport.
But to suggest that we're being treated no less fairly than those towns, I think is disingenuous.
I don't think we are being treated less fairly.
Well, if they're getting more money than
They have
we
more
are.
population though.
Well, but I mean proportionally, per student. Or
I could get you that number and tell you what they're
capita.
getting per student versus what we're getting per student, but you still have a priority school district requirement from the federal government that requires certain dollars to be sent to one district versus another.
And doesn't the state have some definitions that get places more money? It's not just the feds.
I hear what you're saying. You know what? Over the course of the years, legislators finagled with the formula,
Thank you
and so
for
that
word.
created
It's an honest word.
the disparities between
Yeah.
the different
As you
districts.
said, ECS is
And-
determined by some group that we've been told to lobby, but then you said statutory allocations.
Right now, yeah, for the past 3 years, it's been statutory
Someone
allocations.
proposes, but you dispose, right?
Well, no, I mean, I think we're accurate. What we're saying is that throughout the years, whoever the legislators are representing, they were able to tweak the formula more beneficial to the communities that they represent. And at that year in 2009, whatever everybody got that year, that's what everybody got for the remaining 3 years.
Tweaking continues now.
No, it's,
Let me ask you this.
Sure, please.
There's a proposal that has been floated amongst multiple states in the education world called Money Follows the Child. Are you familiar
We
with
do
it?
that with special ed.
We don't.
Well, when
We-
a kid
we
is
don't,
placed
because
out of
not-
the city, the money,
It's not the same. Money Follows the Child would mean that every student in the state of Connecticut gets a flat amount. Let's say $5,000 for the sake of argument. And then as that child's need rises, whether they have a disability or special need or what have you, a percentage more would go into that child's fund.
as defined by social engineering criteria.
Well, as defined by federal government and requirements of which we are required by statute to make sure
So
those children get,
The state doesn't set any extra requirements, only the feds,
in regards to what?
special ed, for instance.
We do have some that are different,
Yes,
but they
you
don't,
do.
we do, but let me finish and then we can go to that. So, if you're looking, from what I understand you're asking for, is you want everybody to get the same amount of money per student per,
No, I don't want to be told that that's what's happening when it isn't.
but I don't think that that's what we're telling you.
You're telling me that there are no state programs that apply only to some cities, other places, and not to others.
State programs?
Well, you're talking
Well,
about
he's
priority
a
districts.
Priority districts. There are priority districts,
Therefore,
right.
getting
Priority
defined
school
as a priority
districts,
district would be a-
Well, you have legal cases. You have the Chef versus O'Neill case that specifically go. Right, but that's not a federal or a state. That is a court adjudicated requirement. We don't have any control over
And then
that.
the legislature put its hands on it to define how we're going to deal with it, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have to try to abide by the court
Right.
Court ruling.
Court ruling,
and
says
that's
you're
why
gonna figure
the
this
case
out.
never
But
been
the
closed.
legislature determined how we do that, and a lot of that involved throwing money at some districts and not at others.
If we do not, we are not in compliance with the judge's ruling, which makes us go back to court, and then we pay millions.
We're still gonna be recording.
But you're
Right.
suggesting there was only one way to define that, and it's the way that the legislature did it.
I think we fell, I mean, and that was well before my
It
time
was
there.
long before your time, but not before mine.
But I think that, from my understanding, we followed what the judge and the courts had ordered
We
down.
did.
But, right, not us, I said that was well before me.
No, I'll drop it. I don't like being told something that I know isn't true, or having suggested to me something that I know isn't true. Then, in other words, we are being treated fairly. And we all understand it. Look at the side of the table that's spoken already, knows that we're being treated unfairly in comparison to other schools. Paul knows that the housing, that's part of it. Andrew knows. Dan knows. I mean, we know it.
Well, I don't think that any of us are sitting here trying to tell you that you are not feeling the pain and the pressure of dollars being sent in one direction and dollars being sent to another. We are not trying to sell you a bill of goods. We are trying to give you as much honest information as possible to move forward in a direction of which is going to be, as we all understand, there's no money.
And thank you for coming tonight to do that, but other people's pain is being assuaged better than ours, I think. Let's see, that's me. I'm sorry, I'll stop. I'm done.
Carl, you in? You're new, but you want to dive in deep end?
I'm gonna try and jump in. So you had started mentioning the money follows the child, and that was actually gonna be kind of my question. So I was looking at the state support per student, and I kind of came up with the hypothetical, so pardon me for the hypothetical. But if you had a town that had like a Magnet Elementary, a charter middle, and then a VOTEC high school, just state-run high school, I get that. But the same student goes to all three, the state's gonna spend a different amount on that child, just based on the graph. Is that how I'm reading the graph correctly? So the state's spending a different amount per student
Yes.
based on the different types of schools?
The state share is different.
For the same student?
No,
If it's
because you
easier,
wouldn't have the
it
same
change.
student in
Well,
three of the same.
You're saying hypothetically.
Right, if you had
Yes,
like a
yes.
Magnet Elementary,
Yes.
like AF Hartford, like a Magnet Middle, and then they decide, oh, okay, I'd rather go VOTEC in high school. The state's gonna spend differently on that child, just based on the type of school. The schools wouldn't get the same share of the money, like it's not following the kid.
Well, that goes back to what I was saying
Right.
before about the ECS task force, how they're grappling with, the different amounts that we pay, for a charter school per student, or for a magnet school. The argument now, in our public ag science schools, that they should be funded at the same level as a magnet. So that's the challenge, and that's where I can see where there would be some appeal to having, the money follows the child.
Well, so I guess my question is, the state's got a horrendous reputation in terms of the largest achievement gap in the country between those of low socioeconomic status and those of high. But, in towns like Torrington, where you also have a very wide income disparity, if the money did follow the child, wouldn't it kind of, I guess, make up for some of that? Because I guess the thing that bothers me a little bit is that the state's favoring one type of education over the other, where it may not be the same for all students based on what would be best for them.
I understand that. And actually, we had this conversation this morning, and I had asked Cheryl that very question, and I said, would that help us or hurt us if we went to that direction? And your response was?
Jill, what is that?
It would hurt us.
Big time.
It would hurt us. And
Unless we develop schools that would draw people in from all these surrounding, except we're the largest micropolitan.
right?
Okay, in the country. And what we need is to have something specific within our schools that would be a draw, that would bring families. That's why we talked about the Arts Early Childhood Center, because they could be available not only to the people who work in town, but maybe come from outlying school districts, and it would be more convenient to have their child here. Or their children participate in many extracurricular activities within the town. Well, you know what, come and get your academics at Torrington High School, and then with your schedule, you can leave, you know, maybe an hour early to go to one of these places, or an extended school day and partner with another, you know, program around here. So, yes, we need something, as we need industry to draw families, we need something within our schools to draw families, and at the same time, we also have to have something to keep our families. Education now is a very competitive business, and if we don't acknowledge that,
Thank you.
So, I hope that helps.
Yep.
Thank you, Senator Representatives, for coming. We do appreciate it. I'm actually on the committee that has been discussing this in great length on school improvement. And one of the things that I'm hoping Mrs. Monica will speak to, or I have a question for, because obviously we've spoke quite a bit about it at that committee, was how complicated the formula is to understand. I think that's part of the problem, and that's why so many districts can go ahead. You know, you feel like you're not getting enough. Well, you don't really understand how the formula works, and I think most people probably don't. So hopefully with the ECS formula task force, it's just going to be, hopefully they can figure out a more straightforward way of designing a formula so districts can understand how the money is being allocated. One of the things that you mentioned was a moratorium on magnet school construction. Is that creation or new, like building construction?
Building construction, dollars,
So,
right.
One of the things that we discussed, obviously, was a school within a school, within the school, so there would be funding for that.
I tried to get that question today, and the answer for that question before tonight, because actually Cheryl had asked me today. And there's not they did not have a difference between a school within a school and the construction, and they were looking into see if we have a definition and to give me that separation. And I'm hoping to have that by tomorrow. The gentleman that would be the, yes, I have the answer, it just happens to be away this week. So if I don't get it by the end of the week, I'm hoping to have it by the 1st of next week. But the question is exactly that. Do you have dollars for a school within or just construction as a whole? And I'm trying to find that out.
Excellent, thank you. And then I'm also curious, this is actually directed towards the administration. The ECS Formula Task Force hearings, the one in Bridgeport, were we involved in that? Did we go to that? Are we planning on going to the next one?
we could not attend that one, and I don't know the schedule, and I'll find out.
All right. Thank you very much for coming.
I have a specific mandate that concerns me, and we've talked about it a lot as a board, and I don't know how much of it might be federal, how much of it is state, but it's technology and moving towards the testing. And I feel ill-equipped as far as knowledge to know what we need, how we can provide it. We're volunteers, with the exception of maybe one member. If I can turn my computer on, that's good. That's technology working for me. But it becomes obsolete quickly, and the legislature sometimes changes the rules quickly, and we're left paying for it. And it's a big concern. It's an expensive investment. So is that one of the particular mandates that you're looking at extending the deadline?
It is.
Okay.
And we knew when the legislation went forward, we had to start somewhere with the possibility that it might have to be pushed back if we hear from districts that have a real big problem with being able to meet that requirement. There's also the possibility that if you are in the process of meeting the requirement, you can be asked, certain districts could ask to push back. That will not be addressed until the legislative session starts back in January.
Obviously, with Oliver Wolcott in town, we have a great opportunity for people not only in town, in the surrounding areas, to learn a skilled trade. But what has happened in our own district is as money has dropped off, revenue has dropped off, or the needs have increased and we can't meet the demand through revenue, we've had to eliminate our programs, and the competition to get into these state schools has increased. And we're left with a glut of students who are not college-bound students. And I'm just wondering if you've had conversations related to ECS that might address that. That's not a social need, that's not as easy as a wealth poverty index, but it is a huge need within the state. And I don't know how you can quantify that, but I'm just wondering if those discussions are happening at that level.
The discussions are happening. I think I need to clarify something though. Oliver Wolcott Tech and the rest of our technical schools are clearly not the school for kids that just don't want to go to a public school anymore. Those are the kids that are getting their education in a manufacturing industry that are looking to go to college. And, you know, across the street, you have a 98% graduation rate, and I would say 75% of those students go to college. If not more of them, the rest of them go right on to work and college. I think there's a misperception between what a tech school was or what people used it for and what it is currently.
My comment's less about what they are and the great work that they do, and more so about that we're not even able to provide a basic for non-college bound kids, a basic vocational education anymore. I mean, that's a struggle, and as those get more competitive for college bound, that they're using it as springboard, that's great, even better. But how can we address that? We're graduating kids who really have nowhere to go. That they don't have an academic college-bound background. We don't have the money to fund them. The technical schools are increasingly difficult to get into. That's just my concern, that it's not so much just wealth, it's being able to prepare a future workforce, and that's another criterion I think that needs to be considered for a public school.
And I might be totally missing this here, but would that not go into the curriculum of which you offer within your school?
Right.
Which in that is clearly by choice of the district, not necessarily mandated by the state.
Absolutely, but what I'm saying with tweaking the ECS funding, is that a discussion that is happening to possibly use that as a criterion? So it doesn't just come down to, well, the town can't afford, you know, where are we going to cut first? We're going to cut these programs that are more on the periphery because we have to teach English, we have to teach math.
I think our priority right now is to look at graduation rates versus those going on to college, going to workforce, going into the military. In my mind, from a state perspective, that takes priority, is to look at graduation rates from high school.
I also want to put in my 2 cents on this. I chair higher education, employment advancement committee. 70% of the jobs in Connecticut in the next 10 years, 70% will require post-secondary education. 70%. So most of your students coming out of the school are going to have to be prepared for something beyond high school in order to get a job in Connecticut. It's a staggering number and a real challenge, but that's what's out there in Connecticut.
Actually, most of my concerns have been answered. Thank you for coming. My one concern was the unfunded management, and it's good to hear Mr. Goodell say we could extend it. I know.
Thank you again for coming. In jotting a few things down while everyone was speaking, I hope to hold you to the fact that you're planning no reductions to any cities, so we can pencil that in for next year's budget. All three very adamantly stated that you don't foresee any reductions to any, at least we can count on flatline.
That's what we plan.
Okay.
Do not ever write it in blood.
Write it in.
We won't get it in blood, but that's what we're working towards, right, Kevin?
Our concern on, from a board point where we were on ECS funding, we've received information that the feds are planning on cutting Title I funding and other funding possibly as much as 10%. One of the questions I know that came through the board was, well, what's the state going to do? Because that, you know, if ECS funding's been flat and the feds are cutting funding to us, obviously they're going to cut funding to you. trickle-down economics, we're gonna take it, I mean, you said it about as great as you could. You're gonna take care of yourself first and we're second. Well, we're unfortunately at the bottom of the food chain. We need to know where it's gonna come from. You know, we're kind of, in a roundabout way, hoping for some promises and begging for at least flat funding if we can't get us any more.
Ken, just as a quick comment to that, you know, we are the guardians of our towns when we're up there. One of the proposals that the governor had asked for was the ability to reduce municipal aid, and the legislature said no, because we didn't feel that that would be the easy way out for the state to say, well, we're going to push this back on the municipalities, which will cause, you know, local property taxes to increase. So we said we own that, and we're not going to give that ability to the executive branch. It doesn't matter who the governor is. The legislature owns that, and we're not going to give it to the executive branch. So we recognize the fact that there was an attempt or a discussion already to have the ability to do that, but we're holding on to that.
And I think everybody around this table understands that that conversation is going to happen every year, that the topic is going to come up. I have just 3 more, and then others might have a quick follow-up. Michelle, you said, and I don't know if I can count the number of times that, I know Mr. Cavanero has said it. You said that the federal government gives you funding with mandates in it. Mm-hmm. And I know that, especially with the online testing and other mandates that have happened recently, I don't mean to single you out, Paul, but I know it's been a mantra of yours is, don't take the funding if the mandates are too great. Can't the state just say no? We want the ability to say no. That if you're giving us a mandate, and I'll use Dan's example, of you're going to give us $600,000, but it's going to cost us $1 million. Well, we don't want it. We're better off waving that off. I mean, we'd rather not have, great, $600,000 is great, but if it comes with strings that cost us $1 million, and I would like to see the state in the same situation. If the feds say, hey, we'll give you this amount of grant money, we're going to give you $20 billion in grant money, but it's going to cost you $45 billion to do it. I mean, just no thanks.
And yes,
don't give that to us. You know, you might think you're getting us money, but don't do us that favor. You know, save us that burden, and that would. You know, you brought that up, and I just meant we look at it the same way, and it's been coming up more and more on this board that maybe we don't want the funding. You know, we know some cities, I believe Litchfield.
I thought that was Stanford.
Stanford.
Really well towns, right?
That said, you know, hey, you know,
right.
Maybe we don't want the money. You know, it's not worth the strain. So we would like to count on you guys to look at it that way as well. And if the mandate's going to cost more than the funding is worth, just thanks for thinking of us.
No thanks.
Don't think of us. And the, I guess the tech school shift. I understand. I had very similar figures that Roberta had shared with us, that 70% of them go on to a higher education, and not sure when that shift happened, but I know from a Torrington standpoint, Torrington has been for years downsizing its shop wing and focusing more on college prep courses, because we were the mechanism for getting kids to college, and the BOAG schools, the technical schools, were the mechanism for creating people for the workforce. When that shift happened, I feel that there was a disconnect between the local boards of ed and the state board of ed's direction to change those schools, because we sure as heck didn't change to bring that in, because our mandates are to, again, graduation rates. It always looks great if you have, and I know Mr. Nargi loves to see our list of what colleges our students are going to, because it's kind of in the mindset of the Torrington Board of Education that we're here to send kids to college. We were never really, we brought up, I know that Frank had, I know Paul has, I did when I was sitting on that side of the table, and Andrew talked about trying to increase the number of technical classes that we offer to try to strengthen that end of our curriculum, but there seemed to be a disconnect between that's the tech school's job and this was our job. So I don't know how we get everybody on the same page that if the technical schools are not going to be technical schools, as far as creating a VOAG work-ready force, then if we could get heads up like that before it becomes the issue that we're sitting in now, because we have a large dropout rate because the kids are disenchanted. They're not getting the courses they want. They can't get into tech because tech is really focusing on sending kids on. They're not focusing on, building a carpenter or getting an electrician or getting an auto mechanic, because, a lot of those jobs have evolved into other careers, getting into, instead of being an auto mechanic, they're going on to aerospace, or they're going on to, some other avenue, to a vocational college. So I guess.
Ken, did we as a state, and, well, before I was there, but did we as a state tell you as a public school, and probably before you were here, that you had to remove the home ec classes or the trades, and did we tell you that you had to remove those, or by choice was that something that the districts just evolved to do?
I believe that was by funding, by the amount of funding that we had and the mandates that we had to do for curriculum.
You
No,
didn't
but
tell
did-
us, you
that's-
didn't necessarily tell us, but we.
You cut the purse strings. You
we
didn't
felt
tell
the
us we had to
direction.
do it.
But see, this is where I think we have a problem. We can't always be that's not what I'm asking. We were never, this goes to a mandate. We did not mandate that you all changed the curriculum of which you were choosing to educate. That's all I'm asking.
No.
Okay,
And
that's,
that, my comment wasn't meant in that.
No, I
way.
was
It
just-
was meant as, it's almost like there was a communication disconnect, because I think from, and I'm not saying this sitting board, I'm saying that Torrington
Right.
Public Schools over years had the perception that, and I'm sure Litchfield, I'm sure Warren Morris Goshen, Lewis Mills, all were under the impression that they were the college prep area. Because, when I went to Torrington High School, we had college prep and we had a business program. There's two separate programs. You either got into Torrington High School and went towards college prep and took those classes, or you went into we trained you for the workforce classes.
12 years earlier, there were 3 different avenues.
I don't know when that shifted. I don't know when this shift happened, but since I got here, it's gone away.
Okay, I'm in my 9th year. My first year on the board, there was a Superintendent Riccio, there was a whole other board my first year, and they had spent the previous 2 years putting in place this thing called the block schedule. Block schedule was designed as an intense college prep, and I can tell you, as a city member of the board at that time, that administration under Dr. Riccio from Arizona came in with the idea that college, that a comprehensive high school was almost uniquely about sending kids on to higher education. And from that point on, there was a concentrated, whenever they had to provide extra staff members in order to realize that block schedule, they were coming specifically cutting out technical classes from the school, more. This was at a time now before what Mr. Nargi's pointing to and John Kisko and everybody else is pointing to, before this demographic shift into Torrington, okay? So you would have disenfranchised kids, but tech school was still satisfying most of those needs, right? And then you had 4 or 5% of the kids dropping out because they weren't going to school and they couldn't kludge together something with blah, blah, blah. So it's 4 or 5. Now with this whole shift of the whole demographic, and we're missing all of those, technical classes. Now we're hitting that 18% dropout rate, 17, 18, depending on who's counting and when.
That's just more why we ended up where we are. It wasn't any of the 3
no,
that were sitting
right, I was
there.
just asking
No.
if you all felt that it was a direction that the state had given you, or if it was a direction that you felt you
Not my
had to take. That was all I was asking.
In my experience, it was
My last one, and then I'm going to see if anybody else has a follow-up. You asked if you wanted us to have you be our representatives in the ECS funding subcommittee, the task force, and I wrote it down. You said, would you like us to communicate to them and represent to them we're not going to ask you guys to represent, we're counting on you guys to represent us at any level of state-run agency. If it's a state-run task force on ECS, we're counting on you guys to represent us because that's what you're here for. We're volunteers, we're doing the best we can, but you guys are the elected ones to represent Torrington's best interests in anything that the state is doing, at whatever level. And I don't want necessarily us to be responsible. I would like to hold our legislators and representatives responsible that if a task force or something like that comes up, please represent us at it. I mean, that's what we,
That's right, yes, but that's not as easy said than done. You have to be selected to be on a task force. What I had said to
But you
Mr.
can send a
Cavanero
letter
was
just
that
like
we would
this.
have no problems communicate your needs to the task force, but it's not something that we can go and sit on. I just want to make sure that that's clear. It's not,
Yes.
by no means do any of us walk in that door and say, oh, well, today we're just not going to represent our town. I
no,
mean,
I just meant, you're asking us to write a letter. We'd
But-
like to have you guys as our representatives write those letters to
but
protect us
there's,
to.
we have no problem passing the information on, but we would not know from your voice and point of view what those needs are and what the complications are.
The third
So that's
Wednesday
what
of
I'm
every
saying.
month we sit right here. You're welcome every third Wednesday of every month, or I know Cheryl's phone is on all the time. Just, if you know of something that's going on, let us know what's going on from your standpoint, and we'll let you know how we think it's gonna impact us positively or negatively, and if you can represent us on that, I think as a board, that's what we would like to see. Does anybody have any, I know, Paul, you had your hand up for a second round, but it disappeared.
Well, yeah, most of those answered. I would like to say one final point, and this is definitely, I don't mean to, well, sort of. When you listen to these kinds of conversations, it just gets to a point, and I hear my own frustration all the time, but I hear the frustration of this board, of this group centered around here, and it starts to get to the point, it really, really does, where you start to feel like you can't tweak this public education system the way we have it now. You can't tweak it. You have to. I go to Mr. Rivero's comment, okay, about supply and demand, quite frankly, in terms of technical education, supply and demand. And we can't address that with this monstrously complex social service / educational thing that we've created over the last 25 years. You can't address that, And so at some point, all I'm saying is, this is me. It's not speaking for the rest of the board. Clearly it's not. This is specifically me. But I know my thought process and my feelings are going toward, a more definitely radical approach will have to be considered. I'm not saying implemented, but considered, Things like vouchers, and I don't know, that's a whole other world, I know, but boards of education, all I'm telling you, and I see the shocked look on your face, but I'm telling you, boards of education are going to be forced to start thinking along those terms in towns like this in the coming years. We're going to start looking for some other avenues to break out of this box, this failed institution. And I'm not blaming you three. This is a 30-year evolution and a demographic change, and it's the world is flat, global shift in where the United States is, and manufacturing states and towns like Torrington. It's a huge fundamental paradigm shifting move that we are sitting on top of. And I'm just letting you know that, I've been on the board, I think, longest now by far, so I'm out there in front because my frustration is going, but they're going to be frustrated. When these people start setting their second and third term, that frustration meter, the little thing on the poultry that pops up, that's going to start getting there with them too. I've seen it before me, and I see it going forward. And it's going to start becoming more and more, resounding. So I'm just asking you as legislators to just understand that tweaking this thing is ultimately not going to do it for us, and we're here to help and assist, but we've got to start thinking something very, very different.
Can I ask a question or a favor as well, as we're going forward? I know that when I was sitting on the education committee, I had emailed the list, or emailed the budget, or, the proposed pieces of legislation. You all need to do the same thing for us as you're asking us to do. When I send, I can speak for my own personal, I can't speak for them. But when I'm sending pieces of legislation, please read and respond. If I don't hear back, you kind of take that as no news is good news kind of a thing. So we need that from you all as well, so.
Okay, I just want to say a few concerns I have. First concern is health insurance. Needs to be addressed at the state level, needs to become more competitive. It's one of our biggest drivers year over year. It's something that we really have no competitive edge at the local level. That's one problem I see with funding education today. Second is, I think teachers' contracts need to be, I think you need to create legislation that states that teachers' contracts should be done in open session, not closed session. Third thing I'm concerned about is need to get the courts to deal with student behavior, which is either criminal or quasi-criminal in nature, and appropriately deal with it, embrace it, and act in a manner which will have a detrimental effect, a deterrent effect on the students, and will also have a rehabilitative effect. And then the fourth concern, which is something we've been talking about all day or all night, which is I think technical schools should be integrated in the communities where they sit under the jurisdiction of the local boards, because I've been on this board, this is 5th year. Since I've been on the board, every year I keep talking to the administration, to the board, to try to work something out, to have a dialogue with our school, our technical school, Albert Wilka Tech, to somehow share resources. There's things that we do excellent at this school. We have excellent, high-performing classes, teachers that will really lead kids to whatever colleges they want to go to if they perform well, to excel there. And in turn, they have programs and things that would be a valuable asset to our needs. Yet, after being on the board 5 years, no dialogue, no ability to work with them. I don't know if it's a legal constraint. I don't know if it's contractual constraints because of the different unions, teachers' unions, things of that nature. But I think you as state legislators should really be thinking in terms of are the resources that are being invested at these state schools really the most efficient when it's so bifurcated and so separated that you're not sharing resources, you're not sharing the benefits that you have where these schools sit. To me, I think it's shameful, and those are my comments, but I do appreciate you, all three of you, coming here, especially Roberta, who came here several years ago, and she realizes that coming to these local boards may not be the most pleasant situation. But we really love being on the board here.
My husband was on the Board of Ed for 14 years.
Okay. Thank you.
That's actually what I was going to say. What Mr. Nargi went, and also what you talked about, Mr. Schraub, was about building, bridging the gap between the public schools and the tech schools. Obviously, we just keep getting roadblocks, at least from our end. I'm not sure how that can happen or what we can do to, I mean, we talk about eliminating shop classes, but why can't we have some of our students go to tech? And vice versa, why can't they come here? I mean, you don't need to answer right now, but there's a way to bridge that gap.
I know the community college and the tech schools cross work and have courses there. I don't know if it's just a case of communicating or setting something up. A lot of it is taking place.
Could you? There's more than that.
Huh?
A lot more than that. This administration has had conversations with the technical school system and with the principal, and they've been very cordial conversations, but there are some very real barriers, such as the differences in the academic technical rotations that they do in their school, the differences in the teacher bargaining groups that make it difficult to trade staff back and forth. So I mean, we have explored some easy wins, like being evacuation sites for each other, and utilizing some of their services that we can use as contracted services to save us money on some ends. But some of those larger issues of cooperation, that you seem to think it would be really easy for their kids to come here and take an AP course. We have a great ECE course with UConn, but their scheduling simply doesn't allow that to happen. So we're going to continue to look for at least the easy wins, and certainly greater wins in the future, but
The scheduling thing, we have addressed at the state level, and I know that there is a statewide conversation about going on a universal calendar to try to make, because we know that that's a complication, especially for transportation and cost.
We did that.
So, right, so those are the steps that we're trying to make, and I think, although very little but gradual, this is one positive step, so.
The other thing too, which some magnet schools could do, and which the VOAG and technical schools do, is they send students back. If they feel that a school is not demonstrating the expectations of the school, they go before, a committee, and they have a parole period, so to speak. And if they aren't doing what they need to be doing, we get notice. Our members of our high school administration attend a committee meeting, hearing, and the next thing we know, we have sophomores, juniors, and seniors who have spent a couple of years in a technical or VOAG program, and in a public school.
You can't say no.
Yeah, and they are public schools, and we're paying tuition to these schools, and we're spending more money for that tuition than we're spending per pupil here in Torrington. So when you look at that, you say, and magnet schools, depending if it's a Craig magnet school or a Hartford magnet school can say to a student, you're leaving. A Craig magnet school could not. So I think that is a critical question we need, because when I think of the interventions and the hoops we jump through to make sure that every child gets an education, and yet these other public schools can send them back, so.
It's on our radar.
Send them back horribly behind to the point that we end up with a dropout because someone returns to us as an aged senior who only has sophomore credits and doesn't want to go through it all again, so they just walk. So the other school doesn't get the black eye. We get a black eye for them not educating our kid that we paid for. And then the kid gets dumped back in our lap only to walk out the door, and then we get the black mark. Right? Not good. You just had another dropout. And then we have many returning this year, and it's going to only hurt our percentages. But.
And we do send 100 students a year to these schools.
Well, hurts the child.
Right.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope we didn't make you too uncomfortable. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.